Hello everyone and welcome to SplitSecond. This week we had the crazy idea of facing off 4 Tevesh Szat decks against each other, in what should be the craziest Mexican standoff of the Citadel of Tevesh. Leite brought Kraum and is piloting the themanaweb stormed list. Our friend and guest Kakah felt like trying an Aluren focused list, pairing Tevesh with Thrasios. Hélder is on some Worldfire shenanigans and brought Rograkh to the party. Too bad he has 0 power. And Baal is on Sivini's list prison Tentacles with Tymna and some white stacks. Before we show starting hands, we want to remember our Portuguese fans that tomorrow we'll be heading to Lisbon for a cEDH tournament with a Wheel of Fortune on the line. These and other tournaments can be found in a new Facebook group created to unify the Portuguese Commander community and its LGSs, to share events and mobilize players throughout the country. And now, let's get on with this crazy Tevesh idea. Leite is going first and he mulligan down to 6, keeping a flooded strand, snow-covered island and a luxury suite for lands. Gamble might be aimed at a mana creep for a turn to Wheel of Fortune, to get a better 7 and disrupt his opponent's plans. Dragon Rage Channeler is great at filtering through the deck and filling the yard for breach turns. He sent to the bottom Gemstone Caverns. Kakah also mulliganed aggressively to 6 and kept a tropical island and a bayou for lands, with a jeweled lotus and a sol ring for ramp, allowing for a turn 1 Tevesh. Worldly Tutor can get some of his combo creatures to go off with Aluren, and he sent to the bottom Cloudstone Curio. Hélder mulliganed once and got a lucky Gemstone Caverns and a command tower for lands, sol ring as well, an infernal planche for ramp, as well as a Jeska's Wheel that he can cast turn 1. Viscera Seer is for dockside reanimation loops, and Ragavan turn 1 is always great to have. Lastly, Baal mulliganed once and kept an Ancient Tomb, High Market and Arid Mesa, with a lonely Mox Opal hoping to find a Mox to eventually cast Archon of Emeria turn 1. This would hopefully slow down the table, being last in turn order. Leonin Relic Warden is part of his Razorcat combo and Yawgmoth is a great toolbox paired with Tevesh Trolls. Ready for this match? Before the game starts, Hélder announces his Gemstone Caverns and actually exiles a Viscera Seer. Leite then gets to his turn, plays a luxury suite and casts a Gamble. He tutors for a mana crypt, and Baal rolls a die. It's a 6 and he randomly discards his Wheel of Fortune, which was his plan all along with his mana crypt. He still casts it and sadly passes the turn. Kakah plays a Tropical Forest, this is nice. Kakah plays a Tropical Island, casts a Jeweled Lotus and follows it with a Sol Ring, casting his Tevesh turn 1. He activates it to create 2 Thralls and passes quite set up. Hélder plays a Command Tower and casts a Sol Ring. He then casts his Commander Rograkh and follows it with a Jeska's Wheel, able to choose both modes and targeting Baal, who hasn't played yet. He gets 7 red and exiles the top 3, and quite the hit. Chandra Awakened Inferno is revealed and he casts her right away. He upticks her and his opponents create an emblem to deal 1 point of damage in their upkeeps, so now he only needs to resolve his Worldfire. With the last red, he still casts his Ragavan and passes. For the sake of saving time during narration, we will not narrate each Chandra's emblem ping, but will mark and animate them accordingly. Baal starts his turn with a Mox Opal and plays an Ancient Tomb, and casts a top-decked Hélder Vial, finishing his turn. Leite loses his Crypt Roll, he plays the Marsh Flats and cracks it for an Underground Sea. He then casts a Mox Diamond, discarding an island and casts his commander Kraum. He ponders for a bit and eventually attacks Hélder directly, putting the responsibility of dealing with Kakah's Tevesh on Chandra. He then passes and Kakah sees an opening and goes for it. He plays a Bayou and casts Worldly Tutor on his main phase. He finds an Acererak to the top and then activates Tevesh, sacrificing a Troll and drawing 2 cards. He casts a Chromox, triggering Kraum and Leite draws. Kakah then imprints an Assassin's Trophy on the Mox and goes ahead and casts his Aluren, which resolves. He follows that with a Acererak, to which Leite responds by casting his Dragon's Rage Channeler. Acererak resolves and triggers to venture into the Lost Mine of Phandelver. However, Baal responds to it with a Leonin Relic Warden, which actually resolves. When it enters, he targets Aluren, but holds priority to cast an Archon of Emeria, which he prioritized the most over the cat. Kraum triggers and Leite draws. Aluren is then exiled until the cat leaves the battlefield, and Acererak is returned to Kakah's hand and his Cry is 1 to the bottom. We are now on Hélder's turn and he jumps straight into combat, attacking Kakah directly with Ragavan. It connects and he gets a treasure and exiles an Yawgmoth's Wheel. He then activates Chandra's Minus ability to kill Kraum, which Leite wasn't actually expecting. But this way, Hélder secures Chandra some more turns. He then casts his own Tevesh and creates 2 Thralls, before playing a tapped Marsh Flats and finishing his turn. Baal gets on counter on Hélder Vial, draws and plays a Bazaar of Baghdad. He activates it right away, drawing 2 cards and discarding 3 lands. He then goes to combat and attacks Hélder's Tevesh with his 2 creatures, and Hélder jumps the cat. On his second main phase he casts an Arcane Signet and passes with one card in hand. Leite gets slapped by the crypt once again and then plays a tapped Sledded Strand. He proceeds to cast his own Tevesh Szat. His Channeler triggers and he surveils a land to the graveyard. He also creates 2 Thralls and then attacks Hélder's Tevesh with the Channeler, which Hélder jumps with the set down Thrall, having a snack. Leite then passes and Kakah ponders on his options. He activates his Tevesh, sacrificing his Thrall and drawing 2 cards, plays a tapped Verdant Catacombs and casts his Thrasios before passing the turn. Hélder starts his turn jumping right into combat and sending Ragavan directly at Baal, looking for a treasure and...
Tchan 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 tchan. Ei, e agora, man? Estás a coçar!
Isto vai ser chato agora.
Quite the hit he got there. Hélder ponders for a bit as he wants to cast some more spells, but eventually taking out the Archon is not wise now, so he simply casts the Serra Ascendant. He activates his Tevesh, sacrificing his Rograkh, drawing 3 cards, and then activates his Chandra, giving another emblem to each of his opponents before passing, hoping to accelerate the clock on them. Hélder's opponents are now taking 2 pings on each upkeep. Baal puts another counter on Aether Vial, draws and activates his Bazaar right away, looking for a reanimation spell as one of the cards he discards is a Razorcat. He then attacks Leite and Kakah's Teveshes. One flyer is unblockable and the cat is shown by a Thrall, and then Baal passes. Leite finally wins the crypt roll, draws and then cracks his Flooded Strand looking for an island that he notices it's on his graveyard already, so he has to go for a tapped Steam Vent. He plays a tapped Blood Crypt and then casts a Time Twister, since he had only lands in hand. Hélder cracks his Marshlands in response for a swamp and then Baal flashes in a Hushwing Grief, before the Twister resolves. Leite then activates his Tevesh, sacrificing his last Thrall, drawing 2 cards and going to clean up, discarding 2, notably a Lion's Eye Diamond. Kakah plays an island and cracks his Verdant Catacombs for a forest. He casts a Demonic Tutor for a Rograkh again, since he has another tutor to get Aluren or removal, and then activates his Tevesh, creating 2 Thralls and passes. Hélder once again jumps straight into combat, sending Serra Ascendant at Kakah's Tevesh and Ragavan at Baal. Kakah responds by flashing in an Endurance, so he's able to block Serra, and Baal refuses to block the Pirate Monkey, which creates a treasure and exiles a Yawgmoth Thran Physician, 2 great hits. He plays a tapped Bloodstained Mire and then activates Tevesh, creating 2 Thralls and then casts Baal's Yawgmoth. He still upticks his Chandra for another emblem for his opponents and passes the turn with 7 cards in hand. Baal refrains from adding a counter on Aether Vial, hoping to get a Grand Abolisher to the field, and then goes straight into combat. He sends the Archon at Hélder's Tevesh and the Grief at Kakah's Tevesh, since Leite can fire an instant and get his Channeler's Delirium online. Damage connects, and on his second main phase he plays a Snow-Covered Swamp and casts a Diabolic Intent, sacrificing his Archon of Emeria. Leite passes and Kakah responds with a Brainstorm as he has counter magic but wants to better see his options. He lets the tutor resolve and Baal tutors for a Razorcat. He then casts a Mox Diamond, discarding a Plains, and with the floating mana from the tomb he casts a Thorn Amethyst as preemptive protection for free counter spells, only noticing now that Leite still has a Mox Diamond available. Leite passes and Kakah is forced to react with a Force of Will, pitching a Swan Song. Baal then activates Bazaar, drawing 2 and discarding 3, a Razorcat included. He goes through with Reanimate, targeting Razorcat, and Leite does respond with a Swan Song. Channeler triggers and he surveils a Jeweled Lotus to the graveyard. Baal gets a Swan and then he casts an Imperial Seal for an Animate Dead, hoping to go at it again next turn. Leite once again wins the crit roll, draws, plays an untapped Watery Grave and activates his Tevesh, creating 2 Thralls. He casts an Arcane Signet, triggering Channeler and surveilling a land to the graveyard. He casts a Mana Vault, surveilling again 1 land to the yard. He then also casts a Reanimate, targeting Baal's Razorcat. Surveilling again, and Kakah, which actually also has a Reanimate in hand, responds with a Pact of Negation that he found with the Brainstorm. However, Leite doesn't blink with his hard cast Force of Will, surveilling a Rhystic Study to the yard. Hélder is then forced to respond by activating Yawgmoth, sacrificing one of his Thralls to put a -1/-1 counter on Leite's Thralls, to draw a card and hopefully take out some of Leite's tutor fodder. He does it again, sacrificing another Thrall and killing another Thrall from Leite, and finds nothing. He goes ahead and sacrifices Ragavan and then Serra as well, but no interaction found unfortunately, so Razorcat enters the field and Leite uses it to sacrifice his Channeler to tutor for an Underworld Breach. The table scoops as he is able to escape his Lion's Eye Diamond and crack it for a triple red, to be able to escape his Dragon's Rage Channeler to sacrifice to Razorcat to tutor for Brain Freeze, and win from there, milling himself completely, escaping Thassa's Oracle after removing Hushwing Grief. GG. After this crazy match, we decided to play another one. This time, Baal won the dice roll and he mulliganed aggressively for fast mana or early stack species, eventually finding a Mana Confluence and City of Traitors for lands. Chrome Mox for ramp and Lion's Eye Diamond is mostly in the list for Razaketh lines. Esper Sentinel is good stack/card draw, and Ashwin Grief is great to prevent any ETB shenanigans. He sent to the bottom Dothy Voidwalker. Leite mulliganed once and kept a Bloodstained Mire, Exotic Orchard and Watery Grave for lands, with a Mox Diamond and a Dark Ritual for ramp, allowing for at least a turn 2 Tevesh. Diabolic Intent is almost a DT with the Tevesh's ability to dump fodder, and the Yawgmoth's Will is great recursion. Kakah also mulliganed once and kept a Swamp, Tropical Island and a Lucky Gemstone Caverns for lands. Allosaurus Shepherd is good to secure his Aluren or other needed pieces, Bloom Tender for ramp, Shrieking Drake combos with Earthcraft or Brain Freeze, and he still has a Dispel for interaction. Finally, Hélder mulliganed twice, finding another crazy fast hand. A single Swamp, but paired with a Mana Crypt and a Jeweled Lotus will allow for a turn 1 Tevesh. Skull Clamp is great with the Thralls, not needing to use his +1 to draw. Red Elemental Blast for interaction, Toxic Deluge in case the table starts getting problematic, and Mystic's Mastery is his finisher with the Worldfire in the graveyard. Let's see how this one unfolds. Before the game starts, Kakah shows off his luck this time, with the Gemstone Caverns, exiling a Swamp. Baal then starts his turn with a Chrome Mox, exiling a Ashwin Grief, and then follows it with an Esper Sentinel. He then casts a Lion's Eye Diamond, not revealing the whole plan, and plays a City of Traitors, activating LED for triple black, discarding his hand and casting his Tevesh turn 1. For the person who didn't enjoy Tevesh shenanigans last game, this time he's the first one to get it. He gets 2 Thralls and passes Hellbent. Leite plays a Bloodstained Mire and cracks it for an Underground Sea. He casts a Mox Diamond, triggering Esper Sentinel and paying for it before passing. Kakah plays a Tropical Island and casts a Mana Crypt, triggering Esper Sentinel and also paying for it. He then casts an Allosaurus Shepherd and passes. Hélder plays a Swamp and also casts a Mana Crypt, triggering Esper Sentinel and also paying for it. So much respect for the card draw potential. He follows it with a Jeweled Lotus and casts both his commanders, Rograkh first and then Tevesh, which he proceeds to activate, generating 2 Thralls. He passes and we're back at Baal, who is on top deck mode. He activates his Tevesh, sacrificing a Thrall for 2 cards, but the land he finds taps for no color, so he simply attacks Hélder's Tevesh with the Sentinel, which is blocked, and then he passes without playing the land. Leite plays an Exotic Orchard and casts a Dark Ritual, triggering the Sentinel and not paying. He thinks for a bit, but from his 2 commanders he decides to cast Tevesh, upticking him right away for 2 Thralls and passing. Kakah wins the first crypt roll, draws and slams his Waterlogged Grove, also casting his Tevesh, triggering Sentinel, but unable to pay. He also creates 2 Thralls and passes. Hélder loses his crypt roll, plays an Arid Mesa and casts a Skull Clamp. Sentinel triggers and he doesn't pay. With the last mana from the crypt, he equips Skull Clamp on one of his Trolls, killing it and drawing 2 cards. He then upticks Tevesh for 2 more Thralls and equips a Newborn Thrall with Skull Clamp, killing it and drawing 2 more cards. With 8 in hand, he goes to cleanup and discards a Toxic Deluge before finishing his turn. Baal draws and activates his Tevesh right away to draw 2 cards, sacrificing his last Troll. He found another land, but a colorless one as well, so he casts his Serra Ascendant, hopefully protecting his Tevesh from incoming attacks. And to be mana efficient, he casts a Chalice of the Void X=1, since most of the fast mana was already played, and stopping potential tutors might be key to hang on as everyone else amasses cards and mana. Hélder responds by cracking his Arid Mesa for Badlands, and then casts an Entomb, triggering Sentinel, but unable to pay, finding a Worldfire to his graveyard. Now all he needs is to resolve his Mystic's Mastery. Baal then plays a High Market, sacrificing his City of Traitors, and passes. Leite plays a Luxury Suite and upticks Tevesh, sacrificing one of his Thralls, drawing 2 cards. He finds and casts a Gilded Drake, trying to exchange control over Serra. Baal could sacrifice it in response, but he'd rather have a blocker for the Serra to protect Tevesh and maybe fire his ulti. Leite then passes and we're rolling for Kakah's crypt, and he's safe again. This game appears to have another turn-based action, which is drawing 2 extra cards in the main phase due to Tevesh. Kakah then casts a Lotus Petal, triggering the Sentinel and pays for it. He then casts a Destiny Spinner if the Shepherd wasn't enough already. He still casts Thrasios and passes the turn. Hélder wins the crypt roll. He equips his last roll with Skull Clamp, drawing 2 cards. Skull Clamp is allowing him to get his Tevesh loyalty higher and faster than everyone else, while still draw plenty of cards per turn. He plays a Prismatic Vista and then activates his Tevesh to generate 2 more baby Thralls. With the last floating mana, he equips another Thrall with Skull Clamp, drawing 2 more, 5 total this turn. He goes to clean up, discarding 3 lands to hand size and passing. Baal draws and plays a Mox Diamond, discarding a Gemstone Caverns. He then goes to combat and attacks Kakah's Tevesh, forcing Leite to pressure Hélder's Tevesh, hopefully leaving his own Tevesh safe from attacks. He then activates his Tevesh, sacrificing the Drake to draw 2 cards, and slamming a Plains into play. He now casts a Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, and after that casts an Aethersworn Canonist, to finally try to slow the table down and pass the turn. Leite draws, then draws 2 more from Tevesh. He plays a Blood Crypt untapped, paying 2 life, and casts his Kraum as well. However, as he goes into combat, he sends only Serra Ascendant at Hélder's Tevesh, wanting to leave his Kraum behind to protect his own Tevesh. However, Hélder responds with his Slaughter Pact on the Serra, triggering the Sentinel but not paying. Leite passes and all hope relies on Kakah's small creatures. His Crypt slaps him for 3, he draws, plays a Forest, then draws 2 more from Tevesh, sacrificing his Thrall. He casts Bloom Tender and then activates his Thrasios to better assess his options. He scries to the bottom and reveals a Neoform. He then turns his team sideways towards Hélder's Tevesh. Hélder responds by cracking his Vista for his Swamp, and then casts a Dismember, paying 4 life, targeting Destiny Spinner. He can't pay for the Sentinel, so Baal draws, and then Hélder is able to block both attackers heading towards Tevesh. Without much to do, Kakah passes. Hélder rolls for the Crypt and loses it. He then pays for the Pact not to lose the game and draws for the turn, and instantly ultimates his Tevesh, gaining control of all Teveshes and putting all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under his control. Due to the legend ruled, he can only choose one to keep and the others are put into their owners' graveyards. He chooses to keep Kakah's Tevesh since he's the player with the most mana and closer to be able to cast it. He then goes to combat and sends Kraum at his owner, as he's the only Tevesh player on Ad Nauseam. Tymna triggers and he pays 1 to draw a card. He then equips Thrasios with Skullclamp and then activates his new Tevesh to sacrifice Thrasios, and therefore draw 5 cards, 3 from the Loyalty ability and 2 from the Skullclamp's death trigger. He plays a Bloodstained Mire and then equips Skullclamp onto Tymna, before going to clean up and discarding to hand size. Baal plays a Polluted Delta and cracks it for his Swamp. He then speaks with Kakah on the possibility to bring down Hélder's dominance, if Allosaurus Shepherd is able to go through unpumped. This way, Baal attacks Tevesh with both his creatures and Hélder blocks with Tymna, drawing 2 cards as she dies. With the less to draw cards, Hélder actually forgets to take the loyalty counters off of Tevesh, but these won't change the outcome of the game. Baal then passes fully untapped, holding some interaction. Leite also plays a Polluted Delta, cracking it for a Volcanic Island. He then casts a Time Twister, as he has nothing else to do and might be a good option to clear that Worldfire from Hélder's graveyard, and give him a fresh, non-trimmed down hand. As per Sentinel triggers and Baal draws. Baal then responds with an Opposition Agent, and Hélder responds to it by cracking his Bloodstained Mire for a tapped Blood Crypt. Leite then passes. Kakah once again loses his Crypt roll. He plays a Command Tower and then casts a Mox Diamond, paying Talia's tax and also the Sentinel's trigger. He discards a Wooded Foothills and then casts a Rhystic Study, triggering Kraum and Hélder draws. He proceeds to attack Hélder's Tevesh and passes. Hélder wins the crit roll, draws and plays a Mountain. He equips Kraum with Skullclamp and sends it back at its owner. On his second main phase, he goes balls deep, activating Tevesh, sacrificing Kraum, and drawing 5 cards once again. He then casts a Damnation, triggering the Sentinel and Rhystic, and doesn't pay for the Rhystic but pays for the Sentinel. He's hoping to clear path for his upcoming turns as he discards to hand size. Baal draws, casts a Jeweled Lotus, and we actually miss the Rhystic trigger. He plays an Ancient Tomb, but instead of Tevesh, he casts a Karn the Great Creator, hoping to slow down those mana rocks and the Skullclamp nonsense. Rhystic triggers and Baal pays for it. However, Kakah feels forced to counteract, with a hard cast Fierce Guardianship. Baal then casts a Leonin Relic Warden, triggering Rhystic Study but unable to pay. It resolves, and when it enters, he exiles Hélder's Skullclamp. He then passes and Leite top decks nicely. He plays a Morphic Pool and then casts a Harnfell Horn of Bounty, which comes quite as a surprise, being played back face up. Rhystic triggers and he doesn't pay for it. He then activates the Horn, discarding an uncastable card and exiling the top 2 cards. He casts the Arcane Signet, triggering the Rhystic once again and unable to pay, and passing, hoping to go all in next turn. Kakah's Crypt has been relentless so far. He plays a City of Brass and then casts a Dark Confidant. He follows that with a Phantasmal Image, which he wanted to copy Bob to recoup, but Leonin Relic Warden is a better choice, to exile Leite's Harnfell Horn of Bounty. He then passes and Hélder also loses his Crypt roll. He plays a Prismatic Vista and activates his Tevesh to create 2 Thralls before passing the turn fully untapped. Baal draws and plays a Bazaar of Baghdad that he activates right away, drawing 2 and discarding 3 cards with mana value 1. He then recasts his Tevesh, triggering Ristic and not paying. He creates 2 Trolls and then recasts his Tymna, triggering Ristic once again and unable to pay. He goes into combat and attacks Leite with his cat, and pays 1 life to Tymna's trigger to draw 1 card before passing. Leite draws and instantly slams down his Kraum, triggering Ristic and paying for it. He goes to combat and attacks Hélder's Tevesh before passing. Now, this time Hélder was actually AFK, and we forgot to tell him to remove the loyalty counters, so that's on us. Kakah finally wins the crit roll. His Dark Confident triggers as well, and he reveals a Demonic Tutor, taking 2. He plays a Blooming Marsh and goes ahead casting said Demonic Tutor. However, Hélder responds with an Opposition Agent, triggering Ristic and paying for it. However, Kakah responds with a Mana Drain, triggering Kraum and Leite draws. Still, the Rakdos player also responds with a Burnout, triggering Kraum and Ristic and paying for it. Such excitement can't be missed, and Leite's cat wants to join in the action. However, before the tutor resolves, Kakah responds with an Abrupt Decay on the Opposition Agent, so he's then able to search for an Aluren that he proceeds to cast. He then casts a Cavern Harpy and follows it with a Parasitic Strix, and without any further responses from the table, he is able to loop them and draining the table with Parasitic Strix and returning both creatures with Cavern Harpy's trigger and activated abilities. GG. Thank you for joining us for today's match, everyone. We thought that having a 4 Tevesh pod would be fun, and it was quite hilarious actually, but this goes to show how a Tevesh in play shouldn't be left untouched. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, Stefan, TJ Rap, Mike Burr, Ajimu, Uncrustable, Drunken House Cat, V, RJ, Heated Shield, Pina, Ricardo and Dragon Steak, our stack breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing or by becoming a patron yourself. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Join us again next week for a new set of Commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then.